Hi everyone, welcome to my channel and welcome back. I'm Jeannie and I've been itching lately to dip on my natural shorties, which I rarely do. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to film it and show you all my process because I know not all of you have longer nails or wear extensions. So hopefully this will be helpful. The dips I'm going to be using are from West Coast Dips. They recently introduced a monthly muse, so they have a collection of dip colors, and for the month, they're 40% off. So these three colors are from the August monthly muse, and I thought they'd be really fun colors to work with. I'm going to start off by cleansing and dehydrating my natural nails. So I've just got some isopropyl alcohol and a lint-free wipe, and I'm going to wipe down my nails really well. It's going to remove any dust from my nails as well as it's going to dehydrate them to remove any excess oils. You do not want any excess oils on your nails because that can cause lifting. So I'm just going to wipe them down really well, and then it's going to dry really quick. I'd say maybe like 10-15 seconds, and then I will be using peel base. And the peel base I've been trying lately is the Olive and June peel base. I got this on Amazon, and so far I haven't had any issues with it. I haven't done it with dip powder on my natural nails, and spoiler alert, it works perfectly fine. But I'm going to go ahead and apply a thin, even layer of this to all my nails. This is an air dry, and I'd say probably about 5 to 7 minutes and it's dry. I just want to make sure that it's completely dry first before I move on to my dip powder. When you're working with peel base, you have to figure out what works best for you. It's not a one size fits all. Some peel bases work better for others, some different processes work better for others. So there's some peel bases that will not work for me. There are some that do, so I try to stick with them because it's really frustrating when you can't pop off your mani, as well as I like to do at least one full layer on my entire nail. Sometimes I'll do two layers depending on how quickly I want it to pop off. But I know some people just do like a strip down the middle of their nail. There are some people who like to do almost their entire nail but avoid their sidewall and cuticle area. So you just kind of have to play around with it to find out what works best for you as well as which peel base works best for you. But of course, if you want to wear a mani for longer, I would skip the peel base. But getting back into my process, I'm using my West Coast Dips dip liquid. So this is my dip base. I'm removing as much of the liquid as possible. Liquid control is going to be really important, especially when you're dipping on short nails, because I don't want too much liquid. I don't want to flood my cuticles. So I removed most of the dip base from my brush, and then I'm dipping into my dip powder. The powder I'm using is Lightning. This is actually a glow neon yellow. So you saw that before I started using it, I gave it a good stir. And that's because glow pigments are heavier and they tend to settle because of that. So I want to make sure that I'm reincorporating that glow pigment into the powder just in case it's settled to make sure that I get the maximum amount of glow. Lightning is going to go on my index finger and pinky, and I will end up doing one layer on my thumb as well because that's going to be my base for my glitter. But I'll kind of go through like why I'm doing it when I get to that glitter. So I went ahead and applied the dip base to my pinky. I dipped into Lightning, and now I'm cleaning up around my cuticle area and sidewalls because I want to clean up the line as well as remove any excess product from my skin because that can cause lifting. The one thing I will mention, which you may have noticed, is in the first layer, it is a little bit sheer and a little bit patchy, and that could be because a couple of reasons. One, Lightning is a neon color, so sometimes neon colors are a little bit more difficult to work with. On top of that, it is a glow as well, which can be difficult to work with. So it could just be the dip powder itself, but I wouldn't worry too much about that because one, I love the quality of West Coast Dips dip powders. They never give me any issues. And I do actually end up doing three total layers on my index finger and pinky, and the coverage is really great. But the other reason may be because of the peel base. So, depending on the peel base you're using and how it interacts with your dip base, it really just depends. But sometimes your peel base can make your dip base dry faster, and so if it's drying faster on you, you may have less time to dip, causing that little bit of patchiness. I don't think it was the issue with this, but you never know. Like it just really depends on the peel base you're using and the dip base you're using, like I said. So if you do have that issue where your first layer of dip base is drying too fast on you because of your peel base, after your peel base is dry, you can apply one layer of dip base, let that completely dry, and then go in with your normal dipping process. And that first layer of dip base that you let dry will prevent your other layers from drying too quickly on you. But I generally don't have that issue with the peel bases that I use the most often, that I'm always reaching for. I've used them for years and they're kind of like my go-tos. I mean, every once in a rare while, if I'm trying like a new dip base, sometimes it may interact that way with my tried and true peel bases, but generally I don't really have that issue, which is why there are my tried and true peel bases, because I get easy pop-offs because that's what I'm looking for. If I don't wear it for a couple days, that's perfectly fine. Like if it pops up in an hour, as long as I can get pictures, I'm happy with it. But I do have an issue where I like to try all different kinds of peel bases. So if I find out a company has a peel base, I'm generally going to run to the website and go buy it because I want to try it. I don't know why, because I have my ones that I absolutely love. And I actually just bought a new one off of Amazon that I'm waiting for it to be delivered today so I can try that out as well. Once I'm able to test out the peel base, I'll keep you updated on whether I like it and whether I think it's worth getting, because it was fairly inexpensive on Amazon. But going back to what I'm doing, I finished up my second layer, I dusted off the excess powder, and I felt like I could have a little bit more color. So, looking at the thickness of my nails, this dip powder was thin, so it wasn't super thick. So, I thought I could afford to do a third layer of lightening without creating a lot of bulk. Whenever my nails are shorter, I'm always super careful, because the shorter your nails are, the quicker they're going to get bulky, which you don't want to happen because I'd lose a lot of my shape. But because they were looking so thin, I decided to go in with a third layer just to build up that opacity and to have a little bit more thickness, because you also want to be careful. It's that balance, right? Because you don't want your nails to be too thick. You don't want them to be bulky, but if they're too thin, especially if you're planning on wearing them for a little while, they could crack. So you need to find that balance of that in between spot of not too thin, so they don't crack, but not too thick to where they're bulky and then they kind of mess up your shape a little bit. But regardless, even with three layers, it was still super thin. So I was happy with that. So I'm glad I decided to do a third layer. But I will skip capping these in clear because I didn't want to put a fourth layer on, although I think I could have gotten away with it. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at the three layers of dip powder, skip the clear, and then I will activate them in file and buff. And luckily, I didn't have any issues with any like patchiness or splotchiness of the color, even though I did file and buff on top of it. I'm dusting off the excess powder, and then before I get into watermelon sizzle, I forgot that I wanted to do a color block on my ring finger, and I'm going to be using tape for that color block. So if I were to do this directly on top of my nail right now, I would just peel up the peel base when I peel up the tape, which I don't want to happen. So to prevent that, I'm going to do a layer of clear dip powder first. And if I would have remembered, I would have done this before I did anything, like any of the colors, because I want to give that nail plenty of time to dry, because I will be activating it. Because if I just left that clear dip, the tape isn't going to stick to that. So I really have to activate the nail in order to get the tape to stick to the nail. So I want to make sure that I have plenty of time for that activator to dry, because I don't want to accidentally contaminate my dip base when I go for the dipping. But it ends up being okay. But I would recommend, if you're doing color blocking and you're using tape, you need something to protect your peel base. You could also do a layer of dip base and let that dry, but I just decided to do a layer of clear and then activate that and then do the tape on top. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and activate my lightning nails as well. I want to apply a generous amount of activator to these nails because I want to make sure that it's penetrating through all three layers of the dip powder to fully harden and cure it in order to be able to file and buff. And then now that those nails are activated, while I'm waiting, I'm going to go ahead and do my dips on my middle finger, which is going to be watermelon sizzle. This is such a beautiful bright color. I feel like this video doesn't do it justice. It's kind of like a neon pinkish coralish type color, because it's not quite pink and it's not type quite coral. It's just such a beautiful color. I've been really loving neon colors, especially for the summertime, even though, to be quite honest, I am over the summer. I am over this hot weather and I am ready for the fall. But regardless, I'm going to go ahead, dip out my middle finger. I'm going to do all three dips on my middle finger before I move on to my ring finger. I finished up my 3 dips on my middle finger, which gave my activator on my ring finger plenty of time to dry. So for the color blocking, I'm going to be using this tape that I get off of Amazon. I love it for color blocking because it sticks really nicely to the nail and it's not too thick either. So I'm going to kind of visualize like where I want the dip powder to be. And so it's going to be a little more to the left side of my nail. It's not going to be the middle of my nail. So I'm visualizing like where I want that dip powder to stop, and then I'm placing the tape and I'm going to press down firmly to make sure that it's flat against my nail. If it's not flush, your dip powder could seep through, so you want to be really careful. Because it's such a small area, I'm going to remove most of the dip base from my brush because I want to be really careful and not flood my skin. And that in that area, it's okay if I overlap the tape a little bit. I apply the dip base and then I'm going to dip into watermelon sizzle, and then I'm going to be extra careful and make sure that I'm cleaning up my cuticle area and sidewalls because inevitably I always get dip base on my skin because it's harder to get in like those smaller spaces. And I do want to be fairly quick about it because there is activator on my nail. It should have dried at this point, but you don't want to like linger your brush because you could harden it because of that activator on your nail. So here I'm just trying to make sure that I have like all the excess product off of my skin, and then I'm going to go in for a second layer to build up that color. So once again, removing most of the dip base from my brush because I'm not even doing a full nail. I'm just doing a little sliver. So I'm trying to get the areas where I missed in the first layer. I'm being really careful. And now like I don't have to be as fast because I have that layer of dip powder. So I'm not putting the brush directly on top of that activator. I did get dip base on my skin. So I make sure to clean that up before I dip, and then I'm going to dip back into watermelon sizzle. Whenever you're color blocking with tape, you want to be really careful with the number of layers you do before you remove the tape because you don't want it to be stuck to your nail. So the more layers you do, the more likely it's going to become a part of your design, or as it comes off, it's going to rip off your dip powder. So you want to be really careful. As a rule of thumb, I do probably around 2 dips before I remove that tape. And when you remove it, you want to be really careful. You don't want to just rip it up because you could rip off your dip powder. So just very slowly and carefully start peeling off that tape. You can see here I'm being really careful, really slow because I don't want to ruin the dip powder that I did. And that removed very nicely, which I am relieved because I was struggling at the free edge. So that's why I went to the cuticle area to start. So I dusted off the excess powder. And now we're going to get into my glitter. So my glitter, this is Sunset Strip. It's a really beautiful like neon pink and neon yellow, which it looks like in the jar, but they're actually like iridescent glitters, which is so cool. So it's going to go on my thumb, a full dip on my thumb. And so speaking of, I did that full dip of lightning first because it's close to the color of Sunset Strip. When this is like a chunky glitter, so I don't want to do 2 layers of a chunky glitter on my short nails because that would be super bulky. So in order to avoid bulk when I have short nails, I'll do a base color, a solid color of what's closest to my glitter, and then I'll just do 1 dip of the glitter, and that way it doesn't have that bulkiness to it. So that's why like when I open the jar, I was tapping the jar against the table. And the reason I was doing that is because the larger glitter pieces, they are heavier, so they sink to the bottom. So I was tapping it against the table to bring those chunkier pieces to the surface. And then once I went to dip, I laid my finger flat in to pick up those larger glitter pieces. So you can see here, I picked up quite a bit of those larger glitter pieces. So I'm just moving them around to like evenly distribute them amongst my nail because I don't want like an area that has a huge concentration of those glitters. I want it to be even. And then I'm going to pour a little bit of this onto my spoonful of chaos just because I'm going to do a little bit of glitter placement and it's going to be easier to pick it up instead of being in the jar. So for that other half or more than half, 3/4 of my color block on my ring finger, I'm applying my dip base. I'm dipping my precision tool into that wet dip base, and then I'm going to pick up individual glitter pieces. Obviously, that's not a lot of nail estate, so it's not going to take a lot of glitter. I don't want to fill up my nail. I just want to place a couple of pieces of glitter around my nail because I'm going to be doing like a leopard print on this half of my nail. And I'm going to use like instead of like dots, I'm going to use the glitters as those dots as my kind of baseline for my leopard print because I thought it might be fun to do. But When I had planned this, I didn't realize that the glitters were iridescent. I thought they were actual like pink and yellow, which they are, but it's really the reflect of them. So you can't see the color as much because I have it against the clear, but I still love it the way it turned out. I just wasn't expecting that. So that's something to keep in mind as well. As I was applying my glitters, I found that the dip base dried on me, and that's because I put it over a layer of activator, which is, of course, going to make it dry faster. So I'm just going to apply a little bit more dip base so I can finish up that placement, which this was a little more difficult because they were harder to see because they were iridescent glitters. I couldn't really see where I was placing them, but I knew I wanted like just a couple more pieces because I wanted to fill that space, but I didn't want that space to be crowded. So I was just trying to make sure I had enough of those glitters. I'm going to go ahead, pour the glitters back in the jar because I don't want to waste them. And then before I go in with like encapsulating all that, I'm going to take my black liner gel. This one is from West Coast Dips as well. I store it upright, but I still get a lot of that gel on like the neck of the brush. So I'm just making sure to wipe off the excess because I don't want it to drip on me. And then where the watermelon sizzle ends, I'm going to draw a vertical line to kind of split my design against the solid color. So I'm just making sure I've got that line cleaned up. And then around the pieces of glitter, I'm just going to draw like broken lines around the perimeter of the glitter to kind of create that like leopard type print. So usually like two or three lines around the glitter, like broken lines. I don't want it to be solid, like just circling the whole piece of glitter. And then once I've got all those glitters outlined, I'm going to go ahead and cure my nail for a full 60 seconds. The liner does cure with a tacky layer, so after it's fully cured, I'm taking some isopropyl alcohol and a lint-free wipe, and I'm going to wipe down that nail because I'm going to encapsulate in clear next, and I don't want to gunk up my base brush with that inhibition layer from the gel. So I'm using my crystal clear from West Coast Dips, and I'm going to encapsulate my thumb and my ring finger in that clear. I'm going to do some filing and buffing, and I want to make sure that I'm protecting those glitters with that clear because if I filed and buffed directly on top of the glitter, that would remove the glitters, which kind of defeats the purpose of what I did. So whenever I'm encapsulating in clear, I use a little bit thicker of a layer of dip base because I want to make sure that that clear is getting fully absorbed into the dip base. I mean, obviously, I don't want so much dip base that I'm flooding my cuticle and sidewalls, but I do use a little extra, and then once I dip into the clear, I like to press down to make sure that it's fully absorbing into the dip base. And I also like to make sure that it's getting into like those nooks and crannies of the glitters to make sure that surface is smooth. Of course, I always want to make sure as well that I'm cleaning up around my cuticle area and sidewalls with my precision tool just to make sure I don't have any excess product on my skin. I may dip back into the clear if I find that it's too wet, but I could just leave it and let it dry. And then I'm going to go ahead and encapsulate my ring finger in clear as well. Now, this is a little bit of a different process than I normally do. Normally, when I'm doing nail art, I'll do my dips and then I will cap and clear, activate, file, and buff, and then I will do my nail art on top of it. But I decided this way that it would make my nail smoother and more even at the surface because if I'm doing nail art on the surface of my nail on not my entire nail, it's going to be uneven to where I didn't do the nail art. But this way, if I encapsulate in clear, that's going to create that clear layer on top of everything, making it smooth, which I actually really like this process. I think it worked well, but I will say, in order to make it even, I did find that I needed to do a second dip in clear. Normally, when I encapsulate my nails, I only do one layer, but for this, I felt like I needed that second layer just to make sure everything was even. So once that was dry, the first layer, I'm going to scrub off the excess clear powder. I always use a stiff scrub brush with my clear, and then I'm going to go in with that second layer just to make sure. Now, not all clears are created equal. Some clears you want to make sure that you're not doing more than one layer because it becomes like grainy and cloudy. But for this clear that I'm using, it's actually super clear. So even with 2 layers, it didn't affect the quality of the clear, which I'm thankful for. I went ahead and applied activator and filed and buffed off camera. So here's how my mani's looking. So you can see they're not bulky at all. So now we're going to get into dip top coat. So in order for your dip top coat to dry, it does need activator. So I'm going to go in and apply one thin layer of activator to all my nails. And then I'm going to let it dry for a full 2 minutes before I go in with my top coat. For my first layer of top coat, I'm going to apply it in 2 to 3 swipes on each nail. I want to be fairly quick about it. In between each nail, I'm making sure to wipe my brush on that paper towel to remove any excess activator before returning it to the bottle because I don't want to harden my brush. After I'm done with my fifth nail, I'm ready to go in with my second layer of dip top coat. I'll know it's ready because the first layer will start looking a little dull and wrinkly. And for my second layer, I can take my time. I can take a couple of extra strokes if needed. I want to make sure that I have my entire nail covered. And I also want to make sure that I'm capping my free edge. And as always, I'm going to finish off my mani by rehydrating my cuticles with my Scales of a Mermaid cuticle oil. This Takes Two to Mango, and it's one of my favorite scents from Scales of a Mermaid. Mango is one of my favorite scents, and I think this may be the scent that drew me to the shop in the first place that started this whole obsession. I highly recommend them for skincare. I absolutely love the scent blends and the formulas. And if you do plan to do any shopping, you can use my affiliate code Genie10 to save 10% off your orders and support me in this channel. I always go a little bit crazy and douse myself in the cuticle oil because I love the hydration and how quickly it absorbs into my skin. And I actually use it for both hands while I'm at it just because my skin could always use a little extra TLC. So anyway, that pretty much wraps up today's video, and I feel much better having something on my nails. And I think this mani turned out super cute. So I hope this video was helpful and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd appreciate it if you gave this video a thumbs up. It lets me know to continue creating content like this, and it also helps YouTube recommend me to others, which helps grow my channel. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I upload content every Monday and Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. As always, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.